I met my wife under slightly different circumstances than most couples. We met at work. Nothing special, you say, and I would argue that since we both worked on the railroad, in the train maintenance industry, this is still quite unusual. She was a conductor, and I was a driver at a station in the Midwest. The railroad we worked for carried a variety of freight over long distances and local routes, serving businesses in our area. Now a brief, incomplete, and basic description of this area of work on the railway. My wife and I both worked in what is known as train maintenance, which broadly means a team of personnel known as a train crew that is directly involved in moving a train from point A to point B, delivering needed cars to businesses, or removing those that are no longer needed. Today, a typical crew consists of one conductor and one machinist. There are many other staff involved in this process, but I want to keep the description short and simple. Typically, railroad companies hire people who are tested by experienced personnel to eliminate those who cannot cope with the moderate physical and mental stress required to perform the job. In reality, hiring bias is aimed at weeding out dependent people, lazy people, or those who don't want to work on weekends, because that's when new recruits are needed. The job is not limited to a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday schedule. Expecting a call in the middle of the night or on the weekend with short notice to go back to work is typical of the life of a railroad worker. Oh yes, by the way, most often, you have no idea when you will return home. So when your significant other asks, "When are you coming back?" a good answer will usually be just a guess. So why would anyone take a job like this in the first place? Good question. The money, benefits, and pensions here are good, so there's that. And some of us are just crazy idiots who have it in our blood and can't handle a regular, normal job. As a rule, in large railway companies, employees are members of a trade union. Unlike many other industries, where one union represents all workers, the railroad has many different occupations, each represented by its own union. This is all quite complicated, and I could write a book about it, but I won't. My wife was hired at the railroad a few years after me and worked at a different station, so we didn't meet until 5 years ago when she transferred to us. As a very sexy 27-year-old divorcee, Dana attracted the attention of everyone at the station, train crews, office workers, and bosses. Everyone was paying attention to her. Hell, even the other women knew about her. I'm not saying that they wanted to date her. Well, maybe someone did, but everyone noticed her, including me. In general, after some persuasion from the boss, who owed me something, she was appointed to my team so that she could develop our site. After spending a fair amount of time with my conductor, she had to undergo a test with the train manager to prove that she was worthy of qualifying for this section and could begin working as a conductor on her own. She was motivated to complete the test as quickly as possible because, being divorced and without parents to help pay the bills, she needed an income. It is also worth mentioning that she was very intelligent and quickly absorbed all the important information that Andy Taylor, my regular guide, and I, Bill Matthews, could impart to her so that she could work efficiently and safely. Another important event during her qualifying period was that chemistry began to emerge between Dana and me. Much to Andy's delight, he noticed this before I realized it, and he teased me every day, telling me that she would have me under her before the end of the year, and that her magnificent figure would be my undoing. Of course, he couldn't help but glance at her butt as she walked up the stairs. Some of them were on railway cars, and just to get into the cabin of the locomotive, you had to climb the stairs, and Andy always gave her the lead in this. To be honest, I myself did my best to get into a good viewing position. Realizing that I had less and less time to communicate with Dana, and that she would soon receive qualifications and work with other drivers, I felt lucky. Andy was not a rival for me. He was a little younger, in great shape and very handsome, but he was also absolutely faithful to his wife. If you saw his wife, you would understand why. Heather was simply amazing and was not inferior to any other woman. I understood that I needed to act. On long trips, at the end of the journey, the crew usually goes out together for a snack and, depending on the time of day, maybe a drink. Andy and I followed this tradition when we reached our destination away from home. This meant checking into the hotel, showering, eating, maybe watching TV, calling home and going to bed to rest up before heading back to the home terminal. A call to work for the return trip could come in as early as 8 hours, and for us, the sooner the better. As we headed back to our home terminal, many of us were looking forward to spending some free time with family or friends. Andy adored his family, and his seniority allowed him to hold positions that did not require him to leave home often, but the family needed money to move into a larger home. We made money, and a lot of it. Since Dana was assigned to our team, she was immediately invited to join our after-work meetings, and she immediately agreed, seeming to like the fact that we decided to include her in our company. After the first few trips to long-distance stations with Dana, when she accompanied us to dinner, Andy decided that I needed help and began to refuse participation, citing one thing or another, leaving breakfast, lunch, or dinner to me and Dana alone. I was fascinated. Andy knew it, I knew it, and I think the whole terminal knew it. Despite Andy's teasing, I decided that I wanted to see if there was a possibility for a future with this mesmerizing girl. I couldn't believe my luck when she didn't mind our alone time. Dana even giggled and joked that Andy was probably playing the role of Cupid. In retrospect, I guess she said it to test my reaction, and pretty quickly we both began to treat the end of the trip less like a meeting of colleagues and more like a date. Our relationship was developing steadily, but I was afraid that it was not developing fast enough. I wanted to be with her, but I understood that she would soon take the qualification exam, and I doubted that she would fail. This meant that she would be transferred to any job for which she had enough seniority. In other words, most likely, she will work with some other man. The smell of her perfume, the admiration of her figure, the absorption of her sensuality, all this will be the pleasure of some other guy. Yes, of course, there were female machinists she could work with, but the odds were against me. Most of the time, it would be a man. Crap. The following week, I was shocked to see her turn up for shift again with Andy and me, although I was sure she had qualified a day early when the train manager called her into his office after our trip to the home terminal. She explained to us that she didn't feel ready enough yet and asked for another week for qualifying trips, directly telling her boss that she needed more experience with trains carrying dangerous goods. All employees serving trains are trained to work with dangerous goods, but in real practice, this becomes more real, so her request was quite convincing. I expected that we would be given several such trains next week. Well, that was good news for me. On the next shift, we were given a train of 106 cars, of which 25 were loaded with nitric acid, which had to be delivered to a plant located 90 kilometers away. So Dana got good experience with dangerous goods. Over dinner, I received information from a friend that we would have minimal rest before the next shift. Despite the threat of short sleep, I still took a chance and invited Dana to have a drink before heading to my rooms. She said she would be happy to join. Deciding to go all in, after one Jack and Coke and half a second, I admitted to her that I would like to be more than just an acquaintance for her. Yes, that's how I said it, with impeccable tact, just an example of romance. It's even funny. I had already realized that I had probably ruined everything when suddenly she took my hand, pulled me towards her, and gave me the hottest kiss that I had ever received. "Damn it, I hoped you felt it too," she said softly. We spent the remaining few hours until morning getting to know each other better, not as colleagues, but as two people trying to see if they should move on. Early in the morning, we relieved another crew and delivered the hot train to our home terminal. Hot trains are trains that have priority for various reasons. After I completed all the formalities and marked the computer as off shift on the home terminal, Dana invited me to her place for dinner. There is no need to say how I reacted. I had been waiting for this for a long time, knowing that she herself was taking the first step. The evening went great, with long kisses on her couch that turned into such passionate hugs that she began to seem to doubt what we were doing. To alleviate her doubts, I said that perhaps it was time for me to leave, having made this choice for her, without forcing her to move on to something more intimate. Her reaction to my sudden decision was not entirely clear. She may have been relieved, but she also showed some disappointment. I wasn't sure, but I felt like I didn't lose her respect because of my answer. My assumption was confirmed when, goodbye, she kissed me so hard that my legs almost gave way. That evening, I found out that she was married and divorced from her husband who was cheating on her. This was encouraging news for me, as I felt extremely negative towards cheaters. I was pleased to hear that she shared my views on this matter. Our next flight was difficult. We were traveling at night, visibility was very poor due to heavy rain, and we all had to strain our eyes to see signals and any objects on or near the tracks that shouldn't be there. When we reached our destination, all three of us went to breakfast and then checked into the hotel. I promised Dana that I would talk later, but I needed to take a shower and sleep. All three of us lived on the same floor, and when we arrived at her door, Andy and I said good night to her. Very tired, she simply nodded, adding a kiss to the cheek. After she closed the door, Andy kept giggling on the way to his room, and when I opened the door to mine, he said, "Good night, lover." 4 hours later, I heard a knock on the door, ... It was Dana. "I can't sleep. There's something I want to tell you," she whispered, looking at the floor. I opened the door wider and invited her inside with a gesture of my hand. Since there is not always a lot of furniture in a hotel, she sat on the only chair and I sat on the bed. "I've been thinking a lot about last time," she began, without elaborating, but I immediately understood that she was talking about our kiss, which ended in an unexpected departure. I'm not one to go to bed easily. For me, this is only with a person who is mine, and I should be his only one. "Is this a problem for you?" she asked, looking up at me with alarm. "No problem," I replied. "You sure? It seemed to me that you yourself weren't sure that you wanted such a close relationship with me," she asked, looking warily. "My only question was that you seemed a little unsure about me, and I didn't want to push you into something you weren't ready for. I was willing to wait until I realized you wanted more too," I replied. "I know that we might be called back to work in a few hours, and that we need to get some sleep. But is it okay if I spend this time with you in your bed?" she asked. "This is exactly the sign I was talking about. Get your things and come to me," I said, trying not to let my excitement turn me into a babbling idiot. She seemed to be ready, because a few seconds later she opened her door and appeared with a bag in her hands and a disarming smile. We took turns going to the bathroom, and I was already lying under the sheet in my boxers when she came out, wrapped only in a towel. "Before we do that, let's make a few things clear. Are we a couple now? Are we exclusive?" I asked, wanting her confirmation. In response, she threw off the towel, climbed into my bed naked, and said, "You are my only one until you say otherwise." Luckily for us, bad weather not only made our journey there difficult, but also slowed down work on the railroad. Problems getting crews to and from trains caused numerous delays. The expectation that we would be called to duty as soon as our mandatory rest time was over turned out to be wrong, and we were given an extra 6 hours before we had to go back to work. After a couple of messages with Andy to agree on what and where to eat, I began to come up with a plan to ensure Dana could keep this event a secret. I wanted to protect her and avoid an awkward situation if Andy guessed where she spent the night. But Dana surprised me with her counterproposal. "If I'm not mistaken, last night we decided to be a couple. I'm not ashamed, are you? I want people to know about this. I think Andy should be the first to know, so let's call him and go out to eat together." "No, I'm absolutely not ashamed. In fact, I still can't believe my luck how I got so lucky with you. I'll write to him now, but you understand that he won't be particularly surprised, right?" And he really wasn't surprised. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and a voice came from the hallway. "Hey, you two, put your pants on and get out of there. I'm hungry." From that day on, everyone knew everything. Mostly we received a lot of congratulations, and a few guys in a private conversation did not fail to tell me something like, "You are a fucking lucky bastard." However, the expected problem was not long in coming and overshadowed our newfound happiness. That same week, after we took another dangerous goods train and returned, Dana was qualified and could now apply for vacant positions. There were many different positions. In some of them, the conductor was assigned to the driver, as Andy was with me, but there was also the option for the conductor to become a reserve, replacing those who were absent or needed for temporary replacement. Seniority determined what position a person could fill, and fortunately, Dinah's number on the list wasn't the worst, so she had a choice. Replacement conductor positions generally did not have an assigned driver, and most performed reserve assignments that, depending on the circumstances, could be chaotic or highly lucrative. I usually worked on long routes with express freight trains, which often brought in the most revenue and were the most in demand. Dana did not have enough experience to fill one of these positions, so we decided that she would take any position for which she had enough seniority, and if necessary, I would replace a driver with less experience so that we could carry out both more time together as possible. Sometimes there were changes, and someone with sufficient experience could be transferred to Dana's place. Then we had to look for ways to be on the same shift again. We did everything possible, and a year later, we decided to legalize our relationship and got married. 3 years later, I began to subtly hint whether it was time for us to think about expanding our family. Dana's reaction was unexpected. She was more thoughtful than I expected. Although she did not make it clear that this was not what she wanted, her response was cool and expressionless. There was something else that disturbed our family peace. Our attempts to stay together at the same job have always been difficult, but recently she took on a temporary job at a site with frequent business trips, explaining that she wanted to earn a little more. After this, a series of her decisions followed, which increasingly looked like she was trying to work separately. The decisive moment was that after another attempt to return to one shift, I was suddenly replaced by a driver who, as far as I knew, always stuck to highly paid positions. I wondered why Jim Bedlam suddenly decided to make such a move when he received a message from Andy asking him to meet for a beer, and soon. We agreed to meet at the Dewdrop-In bar, and when I walked in, Andy was already sitting in the far corner with a full glass, which he was clearly drinking with particular zeal. I immediately realized that the conversation would be unpleasant. He usually drank slowly and not much, but there were already 3 empty bottles on the table. I sat down at the table, waved to the waitress to bring us another bottle, and asked with a half smile, but with a hint of alarm, "Well, I see that one of us is in trouble, yours or mine." "Sorry, Bill. I really hate to be the one to tell you this, but damn it, Bill, damn. Come on, Andy, we've been friends for a long time. You know, no matter what happens, I don't blame you. Come on, lay it out." Andy sighed and began. "On the eastern route, I met our old friend Sly Jenner at the hotel. He had just brought a train there from the west. We are sitting, talking, and then he suddenly starts asking about you and mentions Dana. Crap." And he continued his story, apparently fighting the desire to keep silent about all this. He told me that, according to Sly, Dinah's marriage broke up not because of her husband's infidelity, but because of her own infidelity. According to Sly, her ex-husband was a good man, reliable, and was completely devastated when he found out that she was having an affair. According to rumors, this is how she usually behaved in relationships for several years with one man, and then, as soon as a new interest appeared, she left for another. "Bro, that's not what I wanted to hear, but I don't really believe in cheap rumors," I replied, trying to maintain a confidence that I didn't really feel. "Hey, I don't believe everything either, you know me. But I noticed that she has been acting strange lately. She seems to deliberately choose her shifts so that she doesn't have to work with you. Did you screw up somewhere, and now this is her way of teaching you a lesson?" Andy asked, his eyes searching my face intently. "As far as I know, I have never slipped up, unless, of course, it was something I hinted at the children," I replied, bitterly aware that even this could cause a hidden reaction. "That's not all. Rumor has it that she herself asked Jim Bedlam to oust you. I have no evidence, but there are rumors of this. They also say that since she took his place in a substitute position, they have become especially close. I thought you should know this. By the way, what position are you going to move to now?" "I'll probably take over the old Bedlam place. There are good weekends and decent money," I answered, scrolling through all these rumors in my head and trying to sort out my feelings. It's logical. I have a 30-day shift coming up soon, so I might join you later. It'll be like old times, you and me. But the main thing now is to understand what is happening in your home. Find out if you have a rat in the chicken coop. He was right. I needed to find out what was really going on. I also understood that it was impossible to arrange a conversation with her or make accusations based on rumors and speculation. As Sergeant Joe Friday said, your job is to get the facts. It seemed that her choice of scheduling so that we would see each other less meant that I would have plenty of time to observe. If Dana and Jim did work together in replacement positions, this meant a lot of time spent on sparsely populated industrial tracks where they could wait for the plant to be ready to accept or pick up cars. In these places, among the branches and back roads, it would not be difficult to have fun, especially with decent pay for this time. It is quite possible that I will be able to follow them with binoculars, at least until it gets dark. Then you'll have to come up with something more inventive. Another thought that made my heart ache was that she could be hosting Jim at our home while I was at work. So I decided to get a few security cameras that can be easily installed and discreetly placed around the house. I also purchased a small device, a voice recorder disguised as a pen with a voice activation function. I was going to discreetly put it in the side pocket of her bag, which she took on shift, and thus find out what was going on. So I began my investigation, albeit with some feelings of guilt that I was going to spy on my own wife, who might turn out to be innocent. When I got home around 5 p.m. that day, Dana was upstairs getting ready for work. I took out a recording pen, launched the app on my phone, and checked the connection to our Wi-Fi. Her bag was already by the door, ready to go, so I quietly placed the device in the side pocket of her bag. Now it was supposed to transfer recordings to my computer every time it was in range of our Wi-Fi. Step 1 has been completed. However, due to my excitement, I almost gave myself away. When she came downstairs at the last minute before leaving, I couldn't resist asking, "How is your relationship with Bedlam?" before realizing that perhaps this topic would make her wary. She looked at me in surprise, and I noticed a slight reflection. What was that? Guilt? Wary? Maybe it was both. But she quickly pulled herself together and answered with a slightly defensive intonation. "We are working fine. Why did you even ask?" He always seemed a little nasty to me, especially when he treated newcomers poorly, as if he had some special right to humiliate them, I replied, trying to come up with a plausible explanation for my question. "I would say he treats me like a good guide," she replied coldly. "Okay," I muttered, deciding not to get into this conversation anymore. She simply said, "See you later," without a kiss or the usual "I love you," and left. The second step was to install cameras in different areas of our house. Half of me laughed internally, but then I sighed heavily, realizing that perhaps this was no longer our shared home if what I feared was true. I decided that 3 cameras would be enough, but received the 4th as a gift. I installed them in the master bedroom, living room, spare room, and courtyard facing the entryway. Our guy showed me how they work and explained that they are equipped with artificial intelligence for automatic tracking and slight magnification. I conducted a test by walking in front of each of them, and I was satisfied with the result. The video was automatically uploaded to cloud storage, which I could access via computer or phone at any time. Now I had time for reconnaissance, so I dressed in camouflage, took binoculars, a telephone, and a service radio. Their first instructions were received by telephone, so I did not know where their locomotives were. They were usually on track 14 to the depot. Finding a point from which I could spy on them without being noticed was not easy. I first heard them on the radio when they received permission to go, but then they were far away. By the time I reached the desired position, they were already working. Their next job, servicing another client, was scheduled immediately. As a result, in short, I returned with nothing, unable to confirm or refute my suspicions. I returned home, needing a rest before my next trip, consoling myself with the thought that my first spy might not have worked. If they had already started an affair, or if Dana was just getting ready to cheat, my marriage was over, regardless of this unfortunate evening. Dana returned home in the morning, took a shower, and quietly went to bed while I pretended to be asleep. I wasn't sure if she would be in the mood or not. I definitely wasn't, but I didn't want to make her suspicious by rejecting her, which I'd never done before. The next day, I was to receive a call for a trip to the east, which would take me out of the city for a couple of days. By extending my absence by taking a few personal days, I could begin to investigate my wife's actions. She will notice that I applied for a personal weekend while in another city. This unusual request would have alerted her. Why do I want to be away from home while on vacation? The most interesting thing was how she would react to it. Will she call me to find out why I did this, perhaps offering to come and spend this time with me? Or will he see this as a convenient opportunity to live with some lover? As expected, I was called, took the train east, and checked into the hotel. My conductor did not believe me when I told him that I was taking a day off for personal reasons and would not be traveling with him on the return train. I then went to rent a car and check into the new hotel since the railroad does not pay for hotel stays when an employee is off duty. Shortly after I picked up the car, my phone rang. It was Andy. "What the hell are you doing, Tracy?" he asked, clearly hinting at the comic detective Dick Tracy. Not sure how willing I was to admit my suspicions to my old partner, I hesitated. "Oh, I don't know. It's just, you're just checking on Dina, and don't try to fool me," he interrupted my weak attempt to justify himself. "Damn it, Andy, something is wrong here, and I need to find out what's going on. I was expecting you to do something strange. By the way, I did a little digging myself. You know I'll always have your back," he said, and then told me something that, although it wasn't evidence of betrayal, greatly damaged Dina's reputation. It all came down to her and Bedlam again. He reminded me that we have no hard evidence, only rumors, but why would this scoundrel leave a good job for this? Sure, some locals were lucky and made good money, but not in 6 p.m. positions, so most of us didn't want that. I only agreed to this so I could spend as much time as possible with my wife. "I know what you're thinking, buddy, and I have one reason on my mind, just like you. He's there for Dina." Andy spat out exactly what was on my mind. "We both know he's a self-proclaimed ladies' man," Andy continued. "Most likely, he won't hold it for long. He usually leaves women after a few months. What are we going to do? Shall we beat him up?" Of course, I wanted to beat the bastard up if he really slept with my wife. But I needed facts. If I attack him, I could lose my job. What if I find out that the rumors were just evil, but false? Also, while I'm not a weakling, quite fit and all, Jim Bedlam was a big, strong man who played on the college football team until he got injured and couldn't continue without a scholarship. I definitely didn't want to get into a fight, get knocked down, and then find out it was all just a figment of my suspicions. Rather, my plan was to ask Andy to continue snooping, and for me to see what my surveillance techniques revealed. We agreed to meet in the evening and discuss what we have. When I sat down alone at the dinner table, my dinner was served, and with it, the first few nails in the coffin of my marriage. I sat down to eat, placed my order, and then opened my laptop to connect to the live feed from the cameras installed in my home. There was no one at home, but this was expected because her workday had just begun and she was now on shift. The next step was to test the recorder that I put in her bag so that it would download all the recordings whenever it was in range of my home Wi-Fi. Having found nothing new, I decided to go down to the bar and have a couple of glasses. About 2 hours later, I received a notification about activity in the house. It turned out that Dina had returned home and was changing clothes. The audio files didn't load when she logged in. Then I realized that I had missed one important setting for activating recording. Having checked the required box, I prepared the device for operation. Dina was about to go out again, although from her appearance it was not a date. Her phone beeped and she answered the call, but moved into the kitchen and the microphone in the living room couldn't pick up the conversation. Luckily, she left her bag by the door, as she usually does between shifts. I decided to order another drink and wait for the little voice recorder to upload the recording to the app so I could listen to it. We didn't have to wait long. As soon as she ended the call, got into her car, and drove away, the app on my phone notified me that a new audio file was available. I was not prepared for what I heard on this recording. Jim, yes, it's me. Look, we have fun together, but you need to stop with this. You don't need to piss Bill off on purpose. Jim's remarks, naturally, were not recorded. If she had used the bag instead of another bag when she got into the car and the Bluetooth was activated, I would have heard both sides of the conversation and would have been completely convinced that my wife was cheating on me with this creep. No, I'm not going to do that. He's a good man, and the truth is that I love him, and I want to keep our affair with you a secret, she continued. Then there was a break while Jim said something on the other end of the line. Yes, of course, I love your big size, she said, and paused again. Look, yes, I know that Bill went east and took a personal weekend there. I'm worried that he suspects something. Look, these little games we've been playing are really interesting and very exciting. You had sex with me so energetically while we were riding along the rails. When the whole locomotive was rocking, it was something. But last time you continued even after we pulled up to the signal light. God, that was so intense. We're lucky that you managed to reach out and set the air brakes so we could stop in time. Another pause. I know, can you imagine what would happen if we ran a red light and it turned out that you were in me and because of this there was a mistake? What if we crashed into another train? New pause. Okay. Yes, we said it would be interesting to spend the night together. Silence again. Okay, just this time. I'm home, but since we finished our shift early, I want to go shopping and won't be back for a while. Drive to the mall and park at the bank by 11 o'clock. I'll pick you up and we can sneak into the house through the garage without anyone seeing us. After Dina's final words, it became clear to me. Here it is irrefutable proof that my marriage is completely destroyed, and most likely, tomorrow I will have video materials to present against her. All that's left to decide is how I can get satisfaction. Fuck them both. But how? I called Andy and told him what I had just heard. He advised me not to do anything stupid, not to contact her, and not to let her know that I knew something. Finally, he said, come to me in the morning, and together we'll come up with a plan to put these two in their place. As midnight approached, I knew that the videos against my wife were probably already accumulating megabytes upon megabytes, but I didn't have the strength to look at it. It was not easy to fall asleep, but fatigue still took over. The next morning, Andy called and asked if I was on my way and if there was any useful footage on the cameras. I told him I was on my way out, and although I had recorded files on my security platform, I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Andy, I have a difficult request to ask of you. Look them up for me. I just need to know if it's as bad as I think, I said, and handed him the login information. 4 hours later, on the outskirts of town, I called Andy again. He replied, it's even worse than you thought. Meet me at the drop of Dubar. Immediately. When I walked in, Andy had already taken a table in the corner, away from several people eating there. I have an idea, but perhaps it will seem too harsh to you, he said. I don't think anything can be too tough for me, I replied. Okay, that's the thought that's been running through my head all morning. Those conversations those two had about sex while the train was moving, even as they pulled up to the stop sign. They did it again on tape yesterday. They frankly admitted that they were excited by such mortal danger, Andy said. And what do I get from this? I asked. This is leverage, my friend, very effective leverage. However, that's not all. I have a way of giving them both a hard time, Andy said and continued. Years ago, when we were on strike and management was trying to undermine the union by running the trains themselves, I made a device. It was quickly attached to a traffic light and showed a green signal instead of a real red. Damn, Andy, someone could have died because of this, I exclaimed. No, I never used it. I was too afraid that something would go wrong, and I didn't trust anyone enough to help me do it without putting anyone at risk. Now I have a partner whom I can trust, and who can pull everything off without the slightest damage. I thought of everything, brother. We will monitor the company via radio and use cell phones to know exactly where each train is. We will only work if all the pieces of the puzzle match. We'll wait until the dispatcher decides to hold the train for a 6-hour shift at CP 35, as he often does while a westbound train pulls into the Sandy River siding to clear the line. As you know, this often means that the train waits at the checkpoint for at least an hour. If these two conditions coincide, we will have enough time to climb the signal mast, install the device, and the fake green signal will appear instead of the red one. As soon as their train passes this false signal, everyone will go crazy. But in about 10 minutes, when they have already passed it, the device can be removed, and these two will have to explain themselves. No damage to equipment or people. Perfect plan. That's not all, but think about it first, Andy winked. Damn, do you think this will work? I asked. 100%, Andy answered confidently. To hell with her, and with him, I'm in, I said, perhaps allowing the emotions of my wife's betrayal to outweigh common sense. Now we had a plan. All that was left was to play indifference at home with Dinah, get Andy to replace the guide at Bedlam's old position, and since we would be working on the opposite schedule from Dinah and Jim, wait for the stars to align. About a week later, as we were leaving our shift, Andy showed me the train schedule, and two things looked promising. First, the westbound train was expected to go onto single track and stop at a siding at Sandy River. It looked like Dinah's train would likely be delayed at CP 35 until the western train cleared the track, which would likely keep them stuck there for at least an hour. Later in the evening, I took up a position hidden at a control point. My cell phone rang and Andy said that the expected train was already heading west and would be here in a few hours. I heard Dinah announce the signal light just a few miles from my position and knew that she and her lover were about to find themselves on the path to their destiny. I quickly climbed up my pre-prepared hunting ladder and set Andy's device to the signal light. I went downstairs and stepped away to take a look from the side. In the place where the bright red stop light should have been shining, there was now a green free light. I assumed that when Dina and Jim saw the green signal, they would think that the dispatcher had decided to let their train go ahead or that the western train had already cleared the track and would simply pass by without stopping at the CP-35 checkpoint. Everything happened exactly as Andy predicted. When Dina began a standard call, calling out the locomotive number and checking the signal, I pressed my radio. Being very close to the antenna that was used for the dispatcher's radio communication, I hoped that my small walkie-talkie would interrupt or drown out her call. 2 minutes after Dina missed the false signal, the dispatcher began shouting at them on the radio, demanding an immediate stop. 8 minutes later, I had already packed everything and left. In the days that followed, Andy and I had only secondary information about what happened after this serious lover's blunder. We knew that they were very excited to claim that there was indeed a free signal at control point CP-35 and not a stop signal as the control panel indicated. I remarked that the recording on the locomotive might exonerate the crew, but Andy just grinned. My friend, there are two nuances here. First of all, remember when they decided to install cameras and microphones on locomotives a few years ago? They then ensured that these devices were only needed to prove that the train signaled and rang the bell at crossings. The idea was that some drunk who got hit by a train at a crossing would not be able to claim that the crew did not give the signal. In the end, the union agreed to the installation on the condition that the cameras would not be used to make accusations against the crew. The railroad agreed to this, but with an unexpected caveat. The cameras also could not be used to exonerate the crew. And he continued, I told you that I had one more trump card. I spread the word through a couple of guys to let the authorities know that you told me what was on the security camera footage of these two discussing their sexual adventures as they approached the signals. I heard that management was extremely angry that two of their employees would put themselves and others in danger for the sake of their entertainment. To be honest, I don't think they care whether they were there together or not this time. They want to fire them. That's it. I breathed. Both of them have been suspended from work pending the investigation, he added. This didn't surprise me. The railroad company is always quick to suspend employees and require them to take tests for controlled substances immediately after an incident, but the investigation may take time while they gather the facts. In a divorce, you may be able to use the recordings as a means of pressure to achieve a favorable agreement from Dina in exchange for the fact that you will not make public audio and video recordings of their adventures during working hours. Let your lawyer handle this. He needs to act quickly for it to be meaningful, before the railroad completes its investigation. These lovers may think that without this evidence against them, they have a chance of returning to work in a year or so. Even Bedlam might pressure her to sign a divorce agreement to keep the hope of working again, Andy suggested. I hired a lawyer and informed him of the recordings, their controversial nature, but the potential threat that could force my unfaithful wife to sign an agreement favorable to me. He agreed that they needed to be used as soon as possible and promised to get down to business immediately. He also explained to me all the details of the financial issues that I had to deal with. After avoiding Dina for several days, I decided it was time to meet my soon-to-be ex-wife and kick her out. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I entered the house. I spoke first. You are a disgusting traitor. Bedlam, seriously? Not only are you a lousy wife, but from what I've heard, you're not the best guide. Can we talk? She asked quietly. Talk, unless you start reading me excuses from the Book of Infidels. I'm really sorry. Do we have any chance? I really want to start a family with you. Let me think. No and no again. All I want is for you to get out of this house today. Don't call me, don't text me, or try to get in touch in any other way. My lawyer's contact information is in the package you will receive soon. I already know the name of your lawyer. He called me. Hell, he called Jim too. Jim made me talk to him for an hour, begging me to sign the agreement you're proposing, although I didn't even see him. I didn't even know you found out anything about Jim and me until he started talking about the agreement, she said, crying. Don't worry, you'll see it soon as they print it and deliver it to you. Believe me, I'm very sorry. I don't want to lose you, she said, opening her book of excuses. This ship has already sailed. We're done. It's over. I don't care what you want, but what I want is for you to leave. Today. I don't know where to go. Call your lover and move in with him. Get a job as a prostitute in Vegas. I don't care, just get out of my house. We can get through this, I know, she tried to convince me. How long will this last? 3 or 4 years until you start to be pulled to the left again? Yes, I checked your background. I should have known about you before we got married. I found out later that this is all you are capable of. You lied when you said that your first husband cheated on you. It was you who could not resist and ran around with men. Then Dina looked me straight in the eyes and said, I'll be fired. You did this to us, I know. I don't know how this is possible, but I see it in your face. You did it, and you want me to understand it. Well, maybe Jim and I deserve what's happening to us, but I know you did it out of revenge. I smiled. Yes, I wanted her to understand that she was right, and that I was the one who ruined her life, but I would never admit it out loud. To hell with her and him. Listen, do what my lawyer says. Sign the documents as soon as they arrive. If I have to go to court for a divorce, I will take all the records with me. That way they will end up in public records, and the railroad will have access to evidence of what you and the bastard did at work. Good luck getting back to work. Okay, I'll sign. I need this job. Please don't deprive me of it. I don't know why I can't control myself, why I can't resist relationships with other men. I would really like to be your wife forever, she said, playing the last sympathy card. Dina, out. Go. Away. Now. She got up and left, but returned a couple of hours later with a hauling trailer that she attached to her car. I had already started packing her things into bags and casually throwing them out on the lawn, so the neighbors could see her literally being thrown out of the house. Did you have to humiliate me? She moaned. Just like you humiliated me in front of the entire terminal, I snapped. I later learned that in a last-ditch effort, she called Andy and begged him for help. Andy looked at the caller ID and turned the phone towards his wife so she could see who was calling. Heather nodded for him to pass the phone to her. "Oh yes, this is the dumbest bitch on the planet. You, of course, have done a lot of things, girl, that even the words of the song, 'I Work on the Railroad,' can now be rewritten to suit your case because you failed at everything. Oh, my husband wants to say a few words to you too," she said and handed the phone to Andy. Andy said, "Dina, sign the papers and let my friend start a new life. If you do this, you may have a chance to get your job back a little faster. You seriously hurt the best person I know. Never call me again." As for the lovers, their unions were able to reach an agreement with the railroad. Threatened with public exposure of the signal failure and with only circumstantial evidence against them, the company's lawyers decided not to use it, and the railroad agreed to allow Jim and Dinah to return to work, albeit with some restrictions. Rumors say that the management did watch the video recording from the locomotive and saw that the signal really looked green, but they could not explain this and did not want to question the reliability of the system. The union managed to get the infidels to return to work, but local management insisted that they work elsewhere, preferably on the edge of the line. In order to quickly return to work and start earning money, the two agreed to a punishment of 4 months of downtime and transfer to a distant terminal. I was told that they never became a couple, and of course I said, "I don't care what they do." As for me, grief haunted me for more than a year. I slowly began to come to my senses when Andy introduced me to a very nice young woman who turned out to be one of his children's teachers. Linda immediately captivated me, even though she was somewhat younger and had also been through a failed relationship. We both felt the chemistry between us and wanted to see where it could lead. Our relationship progressed slowly, and at times we accidentally touched each other despite our best efforts to avoid it, but the attraction was undeniable, and we both tried to move forward. After 4 months, we finally realized that our personal battle with the demons of the past was over, and we conquered each other. There was not a single drop of doubt left, and we set a wedding date. 2 years later, we had our first child, a boy we named Andy. Now we are planning a little sister for him. With the love of Linda and little Andy filling my heart, Dina became just a distant, bitter memory that no longer torments me. End. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.